David, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me here, Gary. Thank you for asking me. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's a real pleasure to have you on. The first thing I was going to ask, we were just talking before we recorded about the joys of battling with local council in this age of progress in which we live. But where do you live? It just occurred to me that I don't really know where you live. I know, we've sort of interacted quite a bit over the years through, you did some great stuff for Wales Arts Review over the years, in its former incarnation as a journal, as a website, which is how we sort of first came into touch with each other. So yeah, but then it just occurred to me as I was admiring the guitar heads over your shoulder that I don't know where you are now.
Well, I live in East Anglia in Streatham, but it's not that Streatham in London, and it's near Ely, but not that Ely in Cardiff. So it's it's not spelled the same as Streatham, but all the talking about local Facebook and stuff like that. We always get people from like Streatham in London being like, "Oh, anyone want to buy this 4-door hatchback for a good price?" And then like you get like 20 comments from distressed locals about it, which is like, I love it. I love that stuff. I live for it. But you know, but
Which
yeah, I
is
live.
which is the posh Streatham? Is it your Streatham or I don't know
No,
Streatham in London that
for
well.
branding reasons, I have to say it's not this one. Yeah, but, no, it's a nice sleepy village where nothing bad ever really happens. I would say it's like all of Cambridgeshire is like a really, I think it's got the biggest wealth divide in the UK, but not the poorest people. So it's kind of a strange city in that like everything is quite nice and quite well kept and quite clean, and it's reflected in lots of different things in lots of different ways. So it's like, I sometimes work in academies teaching, and you see that they have particularly good facilities based on some of the kind of donation features that come with like being an academy and things like that. So it's it's kind of a really, really peculiar fairy tale city in a lot of ways, because I don't think many places have that kind of ability to just like, turn their money inwards on themselves. So it's
Yeah,
great to be a musician here. You know,
it's nice to hear that you live in a village. I always have a kind of Vaughan Williams Holstein ideal of where composers should live, and that you'll get your coterie of collaborators together and sit in a field under a birch tree and rehearse.
yeah,
Is that
right.
is that your life? Have I just pinpointed your life?
No, I wish, right? I think I think I'm more like I'm more of a hermit when I write. I think like I'll get into a piece and I'll sort of just I become the people that I'm criticizing on those Facebook groups. I start like, twitching the curtains and wonder what's going on in the allotments and why they've been mowing alone for like an hour, which isn't very long really, is it? I become that kind of guy who's just sort of like gets very antsy because really my piece of music isn't going very well, and I'm just trying to, I'm trying not to face that head on. But I think I don't know. I'd love for it to be I would, in some ways, I'd love it to be more romantic, but I also love the fact that I am just a bloke in a flat doing this stuff. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
there
yeah.
is a charm to that. There is something that excites me about the grotesqueness of like writing for a big symphony orchestra, and it's just like, I'm just sat there like eating crisps, and it's all down me, and then, and then like, oh yeah, no, it has to be F major now. I think it's it feels very. It feels very correct to me. That is, maybe I just like crisps. I don't know what I'm on about. Anyway,
No, but
sorry.
it's part. I think the mythology of art is really important, isn't it? And I think then some people are attracted to the demystifying of that as well. Like, I mean, it just came to mind then about sort of eating crisps. Like, the state of the apartment in the movie version of Amadeus, and, and and the fact that you see like Mozart and his wig is like all torn and hanging down because they've got to wear these wigs all the time, and he's doing his thing, and he's just a mess, and you look at him and you think, God, I reckon he stinks. He
Yeah.
probably really smells bad, and you think like, oh, so we all know Mozart died a pauper, but you kind of have an idea of these composers being, or you composers being like Olympian beasts, being like something above and beyond us mere mortals, particularly for classical music. Um,
It's funny you say that because I remember I did a fellowship in the US a few years ago, right? And we lived in this big, all the fellows, there's about 100 or so of us in this big house, right? And the composers we'd get three free buffets a day, which was great. And it was in the US as well, so all this stuff was ridiculous. Me, at least, anyway. Right?
that's
So
about one buffet I would need a week. I think three
yeah,
an American buffet.
I was there for like I was there for like 6 or more weeks. And I was like, if I stay much longer, I think I might actually just die. I think this might be what kills me. It's like, but there was we had chocolate milk on tap, right? And I remember being in the I was 30 at the time, so I wasn't like 22 or something. I was in the cafeteria drinking this chocolate milk, right? And it was like 10 o'clock at night, just like whatever. And I looked across, and there was a couple of violinists who'd been like playing 6 hours a day just in rehearsals before practice. And they'd all banded together to get a sports masseuse to come to the building and give them a massage. I just felt this like wave of shame as the massage therapist walked in, just like, I need to take this more seriously. This isn't on. Just don't throw the milk away. Just drink it and move on.
Did you feel particularly Welsh at that moment? Was that something that crossed your mind? I don't know. Maybe that's something.
I think so. I think like you forget how much of a funny accent Welsh really is in a global context, really, because it's kind of like they can kind of place you a bit and they sort of vaguely know it exists, even if they don't know where it is on a map, right?
Yeah.
But it's I always find myself sort of like highlighting Welsh things, and I kind of hate myself for doing it after a while, because I'm just like, I'm so sorry I got to do this again, but I have to tell you that, like, Anthony Hopkins and he's Welsh, and Catherine Zeta-Jones were Welsh, and they was cast in The Mask of Zorro as two pre-American Californians. They both sound a bit kind of like, it's not English as we know it. They both got funny accents, so we'll just make them that. It's a little bit like that kind of flavor to it. But there are some Welsh musicians out there. There's Grant Llewellyn, the conductor, has got a presence in the US, so there's a bit of that out there. And I think
they're pretty good on their maybe not in general, but they're pretty good on their European ancestry, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think they love all that
over
as well.
there. You had a few people. Oh, Welsh, yeah, no, I'm Welsh.
And I do love all that kind of stuff. I got to be honest. I think there's definitely like an interest and a pride and a play with it that we don't have here, right? And I think that is fun. And I mean, like, obviously, some would say maybe there's too much of it, but I do think it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's nice. I think it's nice to be interested and excited by stuff, right? And I felt like it was a lot. I felt like the US at least had like a lot of that, and there were people who were really kind of intrigued. Maybe they were just being polite, but I still loved it anyway. I'll take whatever I can get.
But yeah. But no, I think that's true, and I think that's one like defining difference between the British and the Americans, right? Is that Americans are really up for stuff. They're really like, I mean, this is obvious, right? I'm not redefining the American psyche or anything, but they're really happy to be enthusiastic about something and to big you up and to big themselves up, and the British are almost ashamed to sort of do that, to be proud of themselves.
I think so, and I think there's a little bit of like this sort of browbeating sort of sneer at ambition in the UK. It's a bit cruel of me to say about the UK, but I do feel the case. All my colleagues in the US are, like you said, super, super into it. They're always practiced. They're always going above and beyond. And there may be other reasons for that as well. I imagine, I often say this to my wife, like, imagine if you were in the US making a job as a musician and you relied on things like healthcare through that, right? You would be playing violin like you never played violin before in your life, right? You'd be going for gold, right? So we do have that security in the UK, and I'm from Tredegar, where Nye Bevan was from, so I'm very pro NHS, obviously, right? But you can see that there's a kind of there's an energy in the US where the players are so extreme and so gifted and so capable that it's just amazing. It just feels incredible to work with them all the time. I remember seeing Sandbox Percussion at the Vale of Glamorgan Festival for the first time. I actually couldn't believe it. I just felt like I've never, ever, ever, ever seen anything like this in my life. It's such a high technical standard. And it was like seeing in Technicolor for the first time or something. It was just like, this is crazy, And I think that kind of, there's a very sort of American sensibility about like the kind of the ultra drive and the precision and the like the best of the best kind of thing with it. And they were just so easy to work with as well. They were all lovely. They were all really easy to work with, and they were amazing. I was just like, God, how perfect is this, right? Can you stay here? Just do this all the time,
Do you think that sort of culture comes through in the music though, not in the performing of it, but in the writing of it? Do you think there's, that becomes a national style in a way? I mean, but because countries. I mean, I'm talking about things of which infinitely more about than I do, but a national style comes from somewhere, doesn't it? Like the different European styles often filter through a folk tradition for
Yeah.
modern classical, which is why German classical music is different to Hungarian and different to Austrian, and because of the developmental journeys that music has been on. And in America, I always think like there is something. My favorite American classical music or modern classical it has a sort of distinctive style. Um, like the difference between, every time you can always spot Aaron Copland because I immediately think I'm watching a Western, and which obviously is the American cinematic genre. There is a real style that comes through, and probably maybe I don't know comes through that kind of forced attitude. I mean, it's interesting that you've gone from the lack of a safety net to westerns
Yeah.
in American culture in about 4 moves.
Well, I reckon it's like it is that kind of attractive sort of individualism, right? They're like, I remember years and years ago, I worked in a bookshop and there was a copy of Atlas Shrugged for like £1.20, and I picked it
Too
up and I was
much.
like, oh, yeah, too much, £1.20, too much. And my colleague was like, "You'll never read that. You'll never read that." And I was like, "Well, I will now you said it." And and I did, and it was rubbish. I was
Yeah.
like, I thought, but the attractive elements of it are always these things where like there's a moment where the main character sort of through sheer through sheer like personal will just figures out how to fly a plane on the spot as it's crashing. Right? And I like, who wouldn't want to believe that they have that in them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all these other elements where like she's the only one who's doing a good job, or all her co-workers are trash, right? Who hasn't felt that way, right? Sometimes in a job, where you're like, oh, that person, he keeps like, I don't know, stealing lunches, or like, sneezing without putting his hand over his face or something, it's like that kind of thing. But I think that kind of, the power of the individual is like something that's really attractive about a lot of that stuff. So like that westerns and that kind of style of music, and the idea of the composer as this great individual as well is like really exciting in that way. But I do think it's always important to remember that Ayn Rand died while she was having social security given
He
to
was
her, right?
claiming benefits essentially.
So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so it's like, it kind of like, just saying, right? But I think the other sound of that I like with the US is that kind of the urbanization and the new world and things like that. There's a million pieces written about the city and the growth of the city, and the trains and things like that become metaphors for like that kind of that story of like the places that they come from in Europe or other things, right? And I
Mm.
think I think there's some really amazing music there that helps you understand kind of heritage in a new and interesting way. And I think that's something that the US does really, really good now as well, is have lots of stories about people from different places, thinking about things in a different way, and just telling stories in a slightly different way. There's this sort of other kind of techie Hollywood style that I also quite like as well. The sort of like seeping in with video game music into classical music, which is obviously attractive for someone who plays a million games. But I think like the story of the US has been this kind of in musically has been, it's like trying to grapple with the true American style, right?
Mm.
And I'm not sure if they feel like they ever really maybe got that in the way that they wanted. It's probably minimalism though, isn't it? Right.
Mm. Yeah.
But you say I should know more about this. That's what it should be. But for me, when I think of like US music, it's like Steve Reich, Philip Glass,
Yeah.
John Adams, but John Adams more than anything. That's what I really like, is that kind of it's a lot of music about sort of like machines and cityscapes and vastness, even in terms of like there's a piece called Common Tones in Simple Time. I think the quote is "joyriding on the plains of non-event." And I always think that's very American, this idea of like huge roads and vast spaces, but you are in some kind of industry-based machine going forward. It's kind of like, it's nice. It's a very meditative and sort of an early-ish American post-minimal piece. So I think it's 70s, maybe. I don't know. I definitely should have checked that before talking about it.
We'll put it in the show notes. It'll be seamless. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it is.
It's interesting the idea that American art, in a way, not just music, but specifically music in this context, has always been and continues to grapple with this idea of the new world, even though America's 300 years old now as a unified country, or near enough. But it is still trying to understand itself, isn't it? The political battles over there at the moment every time there's turmoil in America, it's about a battle for the soul of America, for an understanding of what America is. And I wonder, like, how do you see, like, what is the battle for the soul of Britain, of the UK? I mean, it's so fragmented. I mean, literally, we're recording this about a half an hour after the Prime Minister has resigned. Literally resigned about, what is it? You literally resigned about 40 minutes ago. After essentially like doing a half decent job, but people don't really like him.
It drives me crazy, man. I didn't mind Keir at all.
No,
I
no.
I felt like a grown up was in the room, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think we just live in a absolutely fragmented, confused, and open-ended time. And I do think the default with that is to kind of feel like, oh God, it is just like nosediving. But the argument I often make to other composers is that, like, well, stuff's changing, and stuff has changed before, and maybe it's just me trying to kid myself into a career, but like there has to be other pathways, right? There just has to be. There is always a way to make something work or find a way through it. It just has to be different to what you were doing already, right? It has to be transformed in some drastic way. And that's the problem. That's the real problem. Is like, it's not about making music. It's about the mechanism of extracting money out of it, right? Which is gross and nobody wants to deal with. In terms of like what that turns out like in the, as a reflection of the UK, I think we just very rarely have anything to say at all at the moment. And I think that's the real problem.
Do you think that's the issue? That do you mean people in general, or do you mean artists or composers? Or
I think like as a kind of a cultural entity, as the UK as a whole, like what are we even trying to do? I often feel like, and that's kind of like reflected in Keir, say, like, I know him, my mate Keir.
But that's what we all do now, isn't it? The media have forced this upon us. They had a person on the phone in this morning, and they were saying, like, well, I'd like to see a competition. I'd like to see Wes stand up and maybe Angela. And I'm thinking, are these part of your knitting circle? Like, why have a bit of respect? Like, the media, and it's because of Boris Johnson, because the media have always called him Boris, and then it's Boris, and then it was Rishi, and now it's Kemi, and it's like, just let's all try and be a bit more grown up. Do you know what I mean? So, I wasn't, we all call him Keir. It's like I wasn't having a go at you then.
So, all right, Gary. Yeah, message received. Yeah,
the revolution starts here, Dave.
No, this is it. This is day one. I think the problem with Starmer, there we go. With Starmer's like kind of stance on things was that he, everybody kind of knew what he really was like as a politician, like a human rights lawyer doing pro bono work and things like that. That's kind of what he was known for, was being a sort of supporter of people and things like that. And when he gets into power, he's trying to grapple with structures that are there that are not geared towards his own politics, or maybe the politics of the people around him, or maybe a pathway that actually would lead to something positive. And I think by diluting the message to try and change it from within, he loses any semblance of identity in the first place. And I very much feel that way about making music in the UK, right? So I think that people have to go through these different arts council applications or funding bodies or different things like that, all of which are set up with great intention and have fantastic people in them. I'm going to go at them because their job is awful, right? But going through some of those application forms and trying to get people to agree to do some of the things that are required to actually access that money, it forces you to push towards particular goals, right? And the Arts Council gets criticized for this, usually in the terms of diversity, but that's not what I mean. I think that's like many people, I think that's a good thing, right?
Well,
I think the problem is where it's sort of, the one I often find difficult is the Welsh language mission that's attached to Arts Council funding, right? Because if you're writing something about something that doesn't have any kind of relevance to the Welsh language, but does have a real importance to a particular community that would benefit from it massively, it's not really going to sit in with that mission that the Arts Council has. And maybe you should be applying for other money, but what other money is there outside of the Arts Council for Wales, right? I think that it becomes a very, very difficult mission very, very quickly to find small sums of money to do like enormous amounts of work. I then think that in that context, people's ideas get pushed around and changed in a way that causes them to have to be altered. And then the end result of that is something that's like, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's not quite what they intended beginning, but it has to be shaped towards various outputs that allowed access to the money. But that means that the end result isn't what the composer wanted, and it's also not really what the ensemble wanted. And in some ways, it's not really reaching any of the goals. Whereas the best work is done where people set out clear intentions at the outset about what they want, and then you pursue that pathway. And I think if you want composers to do make amazing work, you need to give them a serious runway where you're like, you can do anything within these bounds, right? Rather than, we need you to say this in order to get $2,500, right? Because that's a much more knotty conversation. And I definitely very, very, over the years, the stuff that people have asked me and colleagues to do to pieces of music to access money has been bananas. It's just like,
like what? I've got to ask you the follow-on question to that, haven't I?
Some of it is like stuff like, I want you to write the exact same piece again, but like add this one really unusual instrument. Or like, I used to do a lot of contests, right? And in those contests, sometimes when I was like making a living out of them, I would write a piece and then after the fact, like try and map the contest onto it. And that was what felt most like it. Whereas like our contest is themed around like bread. And I've just written, or something like that. That's just hypothetical. I've never won the bread prize. But like, I would love, if there was one, I would 1000% enter that. But there was, if there's like, you write an orchestral piece and you think this is a good piece, but now for the purposes of money, it's got to be about bread. So, right, you get a score and you're like, right, what's it called? And you're like, right, I don't know, sourdough or something, and then you change all the movement titles to a type of bread. But like 90 minutes ago, it was probably about, I don't know, about cars.
The death of God or something.
Yeah. So, yeah, for real though. And you just like, sometimes you do this and you think this is mad and this is killing me. But like, got to get paid, and like, without specifically naming commissioners, stuff like that does happen where you're just kind of like, right, we need this to be, about something else now for this particular purpose. And you're like, what? Like last week it was something different.
But that also, I mean, I'm not just being devil's advocate. I think this is an interesting area of conversation across all art forms. That is part of the history of creating art, right? Is if you need to make a living out of it, obviously no end of artists over the years have not had to because they've had huge personal wealth, right? That's the history of art. But if you want to make a living out of it, you have to fit the requirements of the people. I mean, in a commercial sense or in an arts council sense, that is kind of the push and pull. And the great artists are the ones who find a way to say what they want to say in an effective way that fits in with the criteria of other people. Um, like I would normally quite happily sit down and say, well, the problem with the Arts Council of Wales position is that it's a political it's a political criteria to put Welsh language needs on top of all artists. But of course, they would argue, and I see their argument absolutely, that in terms of the language, that is exactly what Welsh arts and that's Welsh culture, and that's where the connection comes in. I think if you talk to individuals at the Arts Council and Welsh Government, they absolutely see it as political. But the truth is, it is a cultural thing. So they are there to promote and to invest in Welsh culture, and they have decided, or rather above them have decided at a political level, that the Welsh language is the most important aspect of Welsh culture. And that's what they've decided. I mean, democratically, that's never on any manifesto. Nobody was voting Plaid in Monmouth a few weeks ago because they thought that all Welsh art needed Welsh language in it. But
Well, I don't know. I think honestly, I kind of agree with that as a mission, though. This is what frustrates me with it. It's kind of like, I do think that the Welsh language should be prioritized the majority of the time with it. And I think also that's one of the major political strengths of political organizations in Wales, is that
agreed. Yeah, agreed.
especially with Plaid, it's like they've won,
Yeah.
and they're good. And like, I'm looking at them thinking like, this is great. And they're doing stuff. And where it frustrates me is that it almost sort of reminds me of this conversation with Arts Council England about returning to criteria of excellence before kind of political things. And I do understand that the Arts Councils have a mandate to represent the taxpayer, basically, right? That is where that money is coming from in a lot of instances. So it has to make sure that it really does reach those communities. That's the point. That's where that money is coming from. That's what it should be used for. But when it has this discussion about, with ensembles talking about they should be judged on excellence, I wonder where those judgments will come from, and I wonder what we really mean by that, right? I think a lot of the time it's a coded way of saying like we want it to go back to 15 years ago where we were just getting all the money, really, is like what a lot of it feels like from places. And anyway, the relevance of this is that some of these arguments around sort of Welsh funding feel vaguely similar to that, right? Where I think a kind of more open approach to the broadest possible art in every instance would allow much, much more success for people who are creating things, and a much, much more diverse representation of people, because it would allow everyone to participate, or at least have the opportunity to participate in applying for money in some way. Maybe there's a way where you only have to represent X number of particular aims of the Arts Council or something like that, which I think they do a little bit in Arts Council now already, but they have like, which of our objectives do you meet? And you don't have to meet them all. But I think openness is key. And I think there's a little bit of that that's kind of missing. I think that's one of the primary tensions in the UK, really, is this idea that like somehow diversifying music has somehow impacted the quality. I really don't feel that's the case. I think it's the literal opposite. I think that diversifying has irritated people by making it more competitive because the music that's coming out is better. And I think like that's really what we would want, for everyone creatively. And even if you're going to get done out of a job, really, do you really want to lose because you like hobbled someone? It's just like, it's like such a...
Well, the answer to that for a lot of people is, yeah, who gives a shit?
Yeah. I don't know.
That's where the problem lies.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. I mean, such a hollow victory, though. Such a hollow victory. And like anyone with any artistic integrity, it's that whole thing like game recognizes game, And again, when I used to do competitions, you could always tell when there was someone who was like absolutely blindingly good in it. They would always like, I remember doing one particular contest with this guy. I think he was a Chinese US dual citizen. I think he was maybe at Princeton, maybe, or something. Anyway, but like, reading his bio was scary, and you thought, oh God, he's going to bring something in. And his piece was just like it was just a total knockout from start to finish, and you're just like, yeah, fair enough, mate. Like that, you've got it, and you should
Yeah.
have it. Like you should win this. I want the money, but you should have it. And I think,
It's gonna break my heart to snap your fingers before the final.
yeah, right. But I don't know. I think it's worse for everyone if we don't recognize that. You're just not gonna be as good as you could be, right? And
Well,
maybe
what you're kind of edging towards is the return to the old Arts Council of England criteria, which is essentially you have a 1-page application form with the question at the top saying where did you go to school.
yeah, right.
Which, of course, in Wales they used to have the same thing, and they might still do it. I don't know, but it just said, "Have you ever worked for S4C?" And then
Right.
that's how you get your money. But of course, it leads us to the question of you are a proudly. I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about what this means in terms of musical identity. But you're a proudly working class Welsh composer. And we've just been talking about like the Old Boys Club. Like, what is it like to work in the field of music you work in as a working class? Forget about the Welsh thing; that probably comes with its own baggage, right? Or maybe it doesn't at all because people don't think about it. But to come in as a working class composer and to wear that, it's on your website. You've talked about it at length in writing and interviews before. But to wear it so proudly as part of your musical identity.
I think it's an interesting problem, really, because classical music is obviously dominated by sort of wealth and private schooling. And I should say, full disclosure, I did go to Oxford and Cambridge. So, like I am, like when you say, what school did you go to? Like, I'm not going to lie, that is like, it is as bad as people think. And it does open doors. It really does. People have outright just said like, oh, you went here. Oh, that's interesting. Let's have a coffee. And you think, is it really that shallow? And the answer is yes, it is.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right? But, coming from a working class background, I think that like everyone makes you aware of it every step of the way. Especially in England, everyone makes you aware of the fact that you're English. That you're Welsh. God, gotta get that one right. Edit that one, Gavin.
Right. We don't want the Arts Council checking this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. This is it, right? Yeah. I think the people make you aware of it in some ways. The best organizations and the best people just don't care, right? And they just employ you to do things based on the quality of your work. And I think that a truly open organization that really respects the art that they're making will pick the right people for the job based on who they are, regardless of background, whether they're working class or not, right? And maybe, again, I'm being incredibly naive because I know statistically it absolutely doesn't work out like that at all, ever. But I do think that classical music has a massive problem with how it represents people from working class backgrounds of any description. It's the administrative elements of classical music are so bad at managing this. It's almost comedic. There was a conference not long ago called the Class Ceiling. It was something like £100 to go to. I was like, you're so close. You're like this close, mate.
You almost get it.
You nearly had it. You nearly had it. But it's stuff like that where you just think like, this is mad. And it's mad that nobody can see that this is mad. Because we're not thinking about the music when we're thinking about this now. We're just thinking we're just thinking about money and prestige and everything that is peripheral to the thing that should matter, which is, are we making really, 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 really good music, or are we, squeezing pennies out of people that barely have any, or are we just like creating an executive piss up in some, like once a year for a conference somewhere else? I don't know if that Class Ceiling was like that. I'm on about classical next when I talk about that. But like, there's all these other places that cost like thousands of pounds to go to these conferences that are sort of, invitation only for composers and things like that. And you think, I don't know. It's gross, really, isn't it?
But
And
do you think? I was just thinking because they're obviously like, it sounds like the world of literature is slightly further down the road in this. The publishers and agencies have really been working hard to to become more diverse, and to, there's a not a big, but there is a movement of publishing, in inverted commas, more working class writers. There's working class anthologies, etc., etc. But do you think that there's, I mean, I live in Monmouth now, so I'm surrounded by wealthy posh people, and I'm often, not anymore, but I'm often surprised at just the level of ignorance. You just, if they're charging thousands of pounds for a conference, it could be because they just, it doesn't even cross their mind that that's not within the budgets of people. They, there is that kind of just the lack of thought when it comes to money. If you've never been without it, and we all have, right? I'm from a working class background. We've all had periods where we've had no money. In fact, we might still be in them. I'm not saying, but it's just like, you
No
know
comment.
but I think the difference is that if you're from a working class background, and maybe I'm just talking about myself, but I've talked to other people about this and read about it, that if you're from a working class background, you're always thinking about money. You're always thinking about how long is this, when you've got it, how long am I going to have it for? When you haven't got it, where does the next paycheck come from? It's always there. Whereas if you've come from a middle class or higher background and you've never really been broke, that it never crosses your mind that other people, you don't know what it's like to not have any money. Wales Arts Review is back, and it's a podcast. Or rather, the new Wales Arts Review is being built before your very eyes around the central column of my conversations with some of the most interesting and vital cultural figures working today. But for us to survive and grow this time, we very much need your help. If you like what we're doing, like what we stand for, then like our posts, and most importantly, subscribe. The more subscribers to our Substack newsletter and YouTube channel, the better placed we will be to grow and pay writers to tackle the most pressing cultural subjects of the day. Via Substack, you can become a paid subscriber and gain access to exclusive content and an ever-growing Wales Arts Review archive. And by hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, not only do you let the platform know you'd like to see more of our stuff, but you increase the chances of us drawing down revenue from ads. All that goes back into Wales Arts Review to help us grow and improve. We need your support. Press those buttons and then go and enjoy our stuff. It's all for you anyway.
No, 1000%. I think it's absolutely absurd to me. One experience springs to mind where I was in an interview once, and it says, "Oh, it looks like you've taken on a lot of different work. Why do you take on so much work?" And I was like, "Oh, like money." Like, so confused with it. It's like,
because
it's like
they're thinking this looks like a lack of focus.
Yeah, right. And I was like, but I don't understand what you mean. Like, this is, like, if I don't, have to write this much to like make a living off it, it's, you'd never consider that in anything else, And I do think that comes from this kind of selective, overthoughtful attitude that can come with classical music, especially British classical music, where people will spend a very long time on one piece, but maybe not have the truest amount of funding for it. Rather, they will just spend a lot of time on it because they don't have to work in the same way as maybe other people do for whatever reason. But it is very strange. I think that the only way you can really do it is just by having like support around you. Like my wife massively helps me with everything, like in my entire life, like just even like basic sort of like tasks that I as an adult should be able to do and have like messed up over and over again, but it's just like you gotta have
sorry, I'm just
it's just like I am so bad, like I am so bad with money, taxes, just like managing bills and understanding things. Like, for the amount of time I've spent in my life in education, going back to like filling out a tax form, I felt like a moron. Like, I just cannot do it. I have to pay another adult to go through that form and do it, But I think that the myth that people do this on their own is damaging. And I think like the reason I'm mentioning this now is so that, people understand that, like, although it it would be like brandingly important for me to say that like I'm out there on my own. Like it's just not true. Like it's
Mm.
never been true at any point ever, right? I think that anybody who's ever done anything ever has had a huge support network of people behind them. And that could be anything. That could be like that could be like a spouse, or it could be like a teacher who's decided to fund you for something, or someone who's helped advise you on getting extra funding to get a place so you can win money to do another thing. Or it could be like I had a great manager called Tony McGeorge at Heifer's, the bookshop in Cambridge where I worked, who always used to shift my shifts around and give me extra work in the colleges at the concerts so I could meet people and stuff like that. And it's people like that that like give you this extra support or extra access to do things. And like and just you're getting paid for these things as well, right? So you are getting more cash in, right? So it's just like untrue, I think, that people have access to this without support. So when we see people who are able to spend 2 years writing like a 20-minute piece, when they've only been paying 10 grand for it, the question I would ask them is what support is being concealed there?
Yeah.
I bet
Yeah.
it's more. I bet it's more than like, someone giving them a hand here and there.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands and thousands.
Probably
Um,
generational wealth from tea plantations about 300 years ago.
but like, I think there is a lot of. I know there is a lot of influence there because I've been in meetings where people have talked about stuff like this before from specific composers who are really prominent now, who
Yeah.
have relatives who are in really, really prominent fields. And it is insane that those are conversations that are being had when we're like talking about the quality of art. It's
Mm.
bananas. But yeah, I know I definitely not the only one who like works in this way as well. I think it is an absolutely like dice roll gamble of a field to work in composition, especially now more than ever. And I mean, I literally used to make my living off competitions, and I feel it's more of a gamble now than it was when I was doing that, which was actually gambling. So,
Tell me a little bit more about that, because I remember, we used to talk on email quite a bit back in the Wheels Archery days, and which correct me if I'm wrong, but it was during that time you were entering a lot of competitions. You were writing for us about the process of your work and things like that. So talk a little bit about. I mean, that idea. It really did. It seemed like a professional poker player, right? You're just earning money by entering competitions.
very generous, but that is the comparison that I want. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm here to make you sound much cooler than you are, Dave. That's my job
This is
as
it.
the
Yeah, yeah.
interviewer.
No, this is good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's. I think you can easily make like. So the average UK composer's wage or musician's wage is £21,000 in the UK, right? Which is shamefully low for a start, anyway. But you can definitely pull that in through contests in a year if you get a bit lucky and you get good at it, right? So when you're entering composition competitions, you want to look for ones that have high prize money, and you want to look for ones that obscure about strange things that probably fewer people are going to enter. And the argument against contests is, why would you do all this unpaid work for a gamble? And it's like, fair enough, I completely agree. Like, maybe don't do it. But if you are going to try it, I would say that like there are lots of different strategies you can use to kind of improve your odds. I think like looking who the jury is always a really, really good one. People love the taste of their own food. And if you give them something that's like who they are, they will see it and they will respond positively to it, almost in a trackable manner. Like I've definitely put things in pieces of music directly from the jury scores and then be more successful because of it. I think,
Wow.
which
This
is
is like
like
Moneyball. This is amazing.
no, it's fun. It's funny, but I would also say like like support and mentorship from people is really helpful. I went to when I was in Oxford. There's a friend of mine, Andrew Watts. No, there's a US composer called Andrew Watts, and he was we hung around a lot, and he was a really nice guy, but he was like a lot further along than me and a lot better as a composer than me by far, right? And I was always asking like, how'd you do this, and he would show me his CV so I could like model mine after it, and he would like look at my music and talk to me about it. And he always said like his advice for winning contests was always just put something splashy and direct in the first few bars, like some percussion or something like that. And like I do that absolutely every single time I write a contest piece now, is immediately just fill it with something sparkly and a bit technical on the drop page. So they're like, oh, I think there's also like that, like I was saying, that superficial element. You write a lot of text on it to tell people what it is. So instead of writing music that is bright and buoyant, write in the top with the tempo marking that it is bright and buoyant. Just tell them what it is. And like you can like take that further. I think a composer who does this really good without being cheap in the way that I am being cheap is Alex Paxton, where he has like all these beautiful text descriptions about what the piece is, and they're very quirky and very over the top. And they're very proper to the music. And the very final thing I would say is like there is a kind of practicality that comes with like professional level writing, and there are things that like composers who are trying to write for work wouldn't do, like huge string division where you have very little difference between the parts, or like unnecessary complicated writing. A strength of a competition piece is often that it's very straightforward and clear in some ways and very performable. So like always recommend that people do that. And it's got to be perfectly edited. For some reason that matters more. But you can definitely do it. Like I have on at least 5 occasions from scratch. So I'm going to write a piece for this contest and try and win it. And I've gone out and done it. And I was always told that you couldn't do that. And I've spoke to other colleagues about it and said like, people I would regard as better composers as me. And they've said, oh, no, I'm not sure I could do it. And I was like, well, if I can do it, you could definitely do it. You like, and then they go out and do it, which I never said anything then because it makes it harder to win. But like it, but like if you have spent 10 years in music school and like writing music, and you've done massive orchestral pieces for like huge orchestras and stuff like that, and you think you can't write a piece that wins a prize, you're out of your mind, right? You absolutely can. And the only problem is, it is where creativity goes to die sometimes. Eventually you start, like the first time you feed people their own cooking and win, it feels like kind of like you've beat the system. But by the time you're kind of doing that to make money, and like you're kind of in it and stuck in it a little bit, you start to feel like, oh God, I'm now just feeding people their own cooking and not really writing music anymore.
Is that how you ended up feeling?
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I stopped doing it. I'm trying to move towards like commissioned work and other heritage-based projects, because I think that I definitely don't think that it, talking about support and things like that. I remember and tax bills. I remember one year entering a contest, and I was in the final for it in another country, and I remember thinking like, bloody hell, if I don't win this prize, I'm not going to be able to pay my tax bill. And I was just like, don't think about it right now. Just just kind of just get it done. And I did win, and I did pay my tax bill, but it was just like, what a stupid situation to be in, right? What an irresponsible, stupid situation to be in. And I don't think you can live like that forever, right? I think it's just it is just exhausting after a while, and you do fall out of love with it, because you start to think like, this isn't what I got into this to do.
There's something about it though, isn't there? Like you talk about it now that like it's a slightly undignified route to making a living, right? But it sounds to me on the other side of it like, well, you're doing what you need to do to make a living out of what your passion is and what you're good at. And it's like the movie director who makes a blockbuster in order to have enough money to go make his little kitchen sink indie drama over the summer. So you're like not making sure, it's a big gamble, but you're doing everything you can to understand a way to make a living so that you can, I mean, to a certain extent, so that you can stay in the game, right? And find your way out at some point. I mean, we've all sort of found ourselves doing things and thinking, yeah, but this'll get me through, and at some point things will change and I'll come out the other end and I won't need to do this anymore.
I think there is always that kind of grass is greener feeling with some stuff, but I try not to be too down on the thing that's difficult. I know it sounds very wishy-washy and touchy-feely, but I do think that like the hardest part of like most creative stuff or self-employed stuff is just like managing your feelings,
Yeah,
and I think like I think a lot of it is just like, when it's
yeah,
half past 9 at night or like half past 1 in the morning and you're screaming towards a deadline, you've got no money in the bank account, and like you hear the baby cry and you're like, oh, I want to just hang around with the baby, even though it's the middle of the night. And this is the only time you're spending with him. And then you like go back and you're like, right, I got to do this for another 3 months now on this one, these
mm,
2, 3 things or whatever. It does feel like, very emotionally draining, and very like, you can feel the headaches coming on and things like that. And I think that's where it gets really, 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 really challenging, I think, is where you start to feel that kind of weight of it and you're like, oh my God, have I absolutely screwed this up? But it's never
I,
like that, really.
but I've never met an artist who hasn't been through that and doesn't continue to go through that. I mean, the number of times, particularly over the last few years, the number of times when I thought, I mean, I don't know what the alternative is, but like, I'm gonna have to do something else. I'm gonna have to. I've really tried, uh, and we've all, those dark nights of the soul where you're like, I've really tried and it's just too hard, and maybe I'm not good enough. And then of course something happens and you realize, God, man, it's such to do with circumstance and luck, and I am good enough, but so are a million other writers out there who won't write a book, won't get anything out. They're just as good, if not better than me. But there's something about just believing and that determination, believing stroke desperation, right? Where there is something about making a living out of art that is something about, and no pun intended, painting yourself into a corner where there is nothing else, there's nothing else you can do.
I really do believe in that. And I think,
Bowie used to say, make sure you don't have a plan B.
yeah, right. But I think I'm not very good at like working in other situations. I sometimes joke to students and things like that. Like, I remember being in a job interview once years and years ago for something to do with music. And they were like, we have a lot of like sort of like drinks receptions and people like to drink a lot. I'm like, are you comfortable with that? And I was like, yeah, I've been, drinking since I was a child, like I thought I was thinking like,
Did you
like
not
what?
recognize my accent?
Yeah, I was like, do you know what I'm from? I was like, but like, what world is this a positive? Like, it just rewards all the worst parts of like
Yeah.
people. It's like the ability to just work illegally long hours on a loop until you make yourself sick, and the ability to hold your drink. It's like, what job is this? It's just like,
No wonder it's so hard to get into.
yeah, right. Isn't it? Yeah, yeah. It's a real skill set. Like, but is I don't know. I think it's just absolutely bizarre. I do think there is something about like paint yourself into a corner about it, but I also think of it as kind of like, almost like kind of more of like a kind of lifestyle, like again, if I was going to be generous and call entering competitions like poker, then I would be generous and say the lifestyle is like being like a monk, right? And I think it's kind of like, you do this for a belief and a desire to live a particular way that like gives you a sense of freedom that is important to you, and the sacrifices are substantial and difficult and often in a field that frankly doesn't matter in a way that we might want it to in other ways. My old flatmate was an oncologist, and like he is an oncologist now, but I often think like, when he goes to work, he has to tell people they're going to die. Like when I go to work, I have to tell people like, sorry, I wrote bad flute part. It's just not the same. And as much as I'd like to sort of big myself up with it, I think that the real positive for me is like that kind of desire to live the way I want to live and on my own terms. And although I don't achieve that in the way that might be like fantasized about, I do feel like I have succeeded in getting to a place where I am comfortable with it and where it is working. But like I was saying, it isn't without that support. And, I'm immensely grateful for like my family and my wife for just like the amount of slack she has to pick up in both our lives in order for like all of us to be able to do the things we want to do is absurd, right? So it definitely has an impact beyond my own work. And I know that my other colleagues have had exactly the same situations where, like, you know, when you just kind of batting a ball back and forth and the distance gets further and further, and you're like, you're just trying to manage it. But I think that is the requirement of it all, really. You have to just find that way. You have to find that way to make it work, and you have to find the people who are going to accept the things that you want in life and want the same things from life as you, right? And yeah, there's no way that's going to be easy, and I think it's going to get worse over the next few years. But I do have hope that it is. I do think some kind of change is coming. I'm desperately trying not to make some sort of. I can't even think of a clever Keir Starmer joke about change. There's one in the tree. It'd be a bit cheap, but just to let us all know it's there somewhere in the background,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think. Go on. Sorry.
no, I was going to you've been it is quite a remarkable journey, Tredegar boy to flat in Cambridgeshire via Oxbridge. I remember, I mean, this is a sort of tangent, but you've just reminded me going to Oxford and Cambridge. I was in a restaurant in Oxford once having lunch with my wife, and there was two women on the table next to us. It's a very famous little Thai restaurant, and the tables are very close together. It's down a little, I can't remember what it's called, little
Oh, yeah.
alleyway. We used to go there quite a lot in an old like Tudor building, but the tables very close together, and on the table next to us, they were talking, and the one woman had obviously done undergrad in Oxford, and then gone to Cambridge to do a postgrad, and she said. The one woman said, "Well, yeah, but what are what? Why did you go and study this to do that there?" And she said, "Oh, well, I spent 3 years in Oxford, and I really needed to go to Cambridge because I knew it would piss off my mother."
That's it. That's it. Sums it all up a little bit, doesn't it? I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, so you've been on this journey. How does I want to talk about the guitar as well, but how does a Tredegar boy become a working professional classical music composer on the journey you've been through? Because it's not, I mean, I didn't know you in school, but it's not like you were the weirdo kid with the briefcase, right? Who then went to a conservatoire and, you were, and, it's not that, it's not a story about an oddity. It's a story, you seem to be like, you were probably into stuff with a group of mates but you've gone off in this direction and ended up where you are.
I think it's a weird one, really. I think it again comes back to that kind of support thing in some ways, and like work and like, thinking about the people who want you to do the things you want to do, right? So like my mother was very supportive of me doing music, and I always wanted to play guitar and do music because I was good at guitar as a kid, and I could tell I was quite good at it. And I didn't have a lot of things that would make me even remotely interesting or cool, but I could properly and legitimately shred on guitar, and that was cool. And it was at the time when like the guitar was a like a popular instrument in a way that it still is, but not quite as much. But so I was like getting social rewards for that massively, right? And also they had this weird kind of thing where he was also academic, and all of a sudden I was kind of getting lots of different praise for doing things I shouldn't be doing. So it's kind of just allowed to sort of go and play in bars at 16 and get drunk. But it was also like this sort of weird upside down world where that was almost like an extracurricular activity.
So you were doing music in school. You'd learned to read music by this point. You were studying music in school.
Tredegar Town Band. I learned to play the cornet in their junior band by a guy, Matt Tavy, who ran it as a volunteer. It was me and about 3 other people. Taught us for free to read music at Tredegar Town Band Hall. And that was how I learned to play the cornet. One of them was my brother's, one of them was mine. Oh, there we go. It's hard to do this on video, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I see. Yeah, the little boxes. Yeah.
But so I learned cornet first of all, and I like reading music is like the bread and butter of that, right? So you have to learn a bit of that. So I knew how to read music, but I never read guitar music until I was like 16, 17, and thinking of like, oh, maybe if I want to study this, I should actually like learn stuff. But I played in rock bands all through my teenage years, and that was the way to do it, right? That was how you got good at it, basically, because there was a really good, since disgraced scene around there at the time of like lots and lots of rock bands, people becoming massively famous,
Mm.
and like there were lots of really really high level bands that would you could get on the bill with quite easily. As a like a in wherever TJ's or Meze Lounge or wherever, you could just go out there, play, and cut your teeth that way. Write your songs, go out and do them and record them. And I think that was absolutely one of the best things I ever did, because it toughens your skin up so much. I remember when I was in Meze Lounge, actually, someone threw a pint into the speaker of my amp, right? And then I often think of that when someone comes up to me after a classical music concert and they'll tell me like they didn't like the harmony in the second movement. I'll often think like, I'll be like, what happens next, mate? Someone set my hair on fire in a live lounge once. It wasn't a gig, but I was just like, look, mate, if you're not gonna go all the way with this, like,
If you're not going to throw a glass at me,
yeah,
then,
it's not
then
gonna,
jog on.
yeah, it's like this barely even comes on the radar. But like, yeah, still make music with the guy who wrote music there, a guy called Stephen Howells, who's a fantastic songwriter, really, really good. His cousin, Chris Morgan, it was in the band Midas Suno and Accident Music and things like that. I guess they're like prominent like Welsh bands and stuff. And I think, I think like being around all sorts of stuff like that was really, really, really good. I mean, it's the best way to learn is to just write, play your music and get it out there, because that was what it was all about. Nobody cared about the abstraction of it. Then again, like support in school was really key with it. There was a couple of really inspiring teachers who were like the 80% or more people were just like, you'll never make a living out of this and you will never do it. And like really upfront about that. Like it just isn't going to happen. Go and do math.
Were there people who said that sentence to you?
Like outright over like many, many people. But there were one or two like confirmed exactly what I wanted to hear, which was like, just give it a go basically. And would actually legitimately help. I had a really good music teacher in secondary school, a really good guitar teacher. They brought in a bass teacher to teach me, but he said, I teach bass. I can't do the grade 8 guitar. So I'm just going to give up this role and get this different guitar teacher in for you. Which, like, I can't imagine a teacher doing that now. like I work with music services, and I was just like, what a responsible thing for an adult to do in that situation. But yeah, and then I was able to like really start to properly learn. And there was the Oxford and Cambridge thing. There was a teacher called Lisa Tippins. She died now, I think. And well, I know. And she was the one who said to my mother one year, who was like, oh, you should consider applying to Oxford. And that was the only time I'd even like considered the idea to it really.
And that was what did you study? That was to do music.
Yeah, I went to Cardiff for music. Mm-hmm. So with Oxford, I didn't get in for an undergraduate, and then I got in on. I got nominated for 2 scholarships for my masters, and then I turned it down for a PhD. So I got the full circle experience and managed to eventually say no to them in the end. It was a very. There were great teachers there. There were some really, really great teachers there. Like Martin Harry, I thought was really, really good. He was a composer. But my first experience of meeting the staff at Brasenose College was, he asked me where I was from. I told him, and he went, "Oh, well, that's a shame." And this guy was like, I think he was literally like the assistant dean or something like that. So I don't know. I always think it's funny.
Maybe he just thought he was being funny.
I think so. Yeah, I guess. But I was just like, I just got it. On the application form, they said you needed to buy 3 suits to go and study for your masters there. And the tuxedo and the sub-fask, right, they give descriptions of, but the lounge suit was like so confusing as an idea.
The lounge suit.
Right, you have to have a third one that wasn't a tuxedo, but wasn't like the black suit that you wear for the academic dress for the matriculations. But like you talk about class access. Yeah. What a stupid system to have at university. It is preposterous. And that was like, for all the wonderful things that are at those institutions, that is some of the worst, is that kind of cheap academic posturing that's been around for like 100, well, not even that, hundreds and hundreds of years. I do think it is fundamentally silly. I do think it blocks people out. And much like criticisms of other things, it stops you thinking about the thing that you're supposed to be thinking about, which is making something really good or learning. And instead you're worrying about like literally what tassels are appropriate to have on your gown based on your degree, right? And you just think like, I hate this. I hate this, and I never ever want to think about that. But there were many,
Well,
many great things.
luckily you've worn the right tassels for this podcast interview. That I was going to have
I
a
did.
word, but you've got the right ones on there.
They're on under the shirt as well, and yeah, that's the joke there, right? But yeah, it's all like, but it's just, you just think it's like, it's preposterous, really, isn't it? Where you just think like, how, when they're having all these conversations about access, that people will like really stand up tooth and nail for this stuff. I think like I'm fine with the traditions to some extent, and I'm fine with people upholding them, but you gotta let people have a road in. You know, it's
But
very,
but
very.
but at every point, presumably, because we're here talking now, at every point you've just kind of rolled your eyes at it and got on with it, I suppose.
To some extent, I didn't engage with it in Oxford at all. I didn't go to the formal halls because I was like, I really don't feel, I really don't enjoy this aspect of living here. I don't feel comfortable with it. When I was in Cambridge, they paid our staff living wages, so I did go to those ones, and they were good and they were fun. And like, I get the attraction of it. You dress up like Harry Potter and you go out and get wasted and have a 3-course silver service meal. What's not to like, right? You know, that's I think there are ethical implications to it. And at the time in Cambridge, I remember frequently having the argument that like, people would often say like, well, we're learning how to like network by doing this. And I was like, come on, who are you kidding? This is just like advanced student drinking. Let's not be silly, you know. But I hate to say it, but I think there is an element of that it does train you for those things later on. And
Have you ever found in later life after that where there's something that hasn't come across your desk because you didn't go to those events, or you've found, oh, there's connections there because I know those two guys were, you know, what, in the Bullingdon Club together or whatever the cliche is, but
I wouldn't have been. I wasn't fancy enough to make it in there. But like, wouldn't even got through the door. But I think definitely that like the thing that makes Oxford and Cambridge really, really good is that any person who goes there usually is really motivated to do whatever they're doing, and they're kind of gonna be good whatever they do. Really, they're gonna be successful whatever they do, and like almost everyone I went to Oxford and Cambridge with does some incredible thing elsewhere. And you do see those people further down the line. And it was the same at Cardiff as well. Those people do go on and do stuff, and you see them in places, and then you connect with them through that, and you know them through that. But I think the sort of people I hang around with were people who were like idealistic in a way that I often am as well, rather than, the sort of people paying like £500 to meet Jacob Rees-Mogg, which is stuff that literally happens. You know, I wasn't going down the pub with them. You know what I mean? Like, and it's fine if they want to do that, but like, I don't
yeah.
want to do that. Right?
Yeah.
I think
what was your experience at Cardiff like? Because obviously, they've had, you know, it's shown itself up to be a rather troubled institution in the last 4 or 5 years, and the music department at one point was in the centre of that trouble, wasn't it?
well, it was, yeah. I won their Wales to the World category at their 30ish awards, and I got to meet the Vice Chancellor just after some of those things had happened.
Oh, wow, you shook her hand.
Yeah, and it was quite funny because it was just kind
Did you
of like,
blister?
it was just you could I don't know, you could sense that there was like a sort of, and she did remark on it at the time. She was like, oh yeah, like it's a very complicated time for the institution. And I was like,
The thing that gets me about her is she was explicitly hired to make redundancies and cutbacks, and she's done a fucking abysmal job of it.
it's wild to me that they would like ever consider cutting that music department of all the music departments in Wales. It is probably the most historically significant of the lot. It was set up by Alan Hodnott. It's trained like the majority of the big Welsh composers, some of which are the most like high-selling composers of all time. You know, like Carl Jenkins and things like that. Make of him what you will. I got a soft spot for him. I think he gets a rough ride.
Yeah,
right?
I like Carl.
And I think he's he is enormously successful. He is Welsh, and he went to Cardiff.
Yeah.
Alan Hodnott, our only international figure of the 20th century that stood alongside like the actual greats. He set up that department. Why would you? Why would you try and shut that one down? It's the only one with those historical links. It's like the Royal Welsh is great, but it doesn't have that heritage. It has a royal status, which is really important, but it isn't linked to that essential Welsh musical culture. And, you know, I worked with the Vale of Glamorgan Festival for a while, and that shut down as well, like so many other places. But like the argument that isn't being heard is once it's gone, it's gone. And it
Mm.
really is. And I know that like a lot of organizations are thinking you can set up these like monster festivals with like 500 artists in there and replace these local ones with those, but it just doesn't do the same thing. It doesn't create those connections. It doesn't have that legacy. And like, honestly, no one really gives a shit. It's just like white noise. It's like a
Mm.
bill of like 100 people. And like, I love music. I can't be bothered to read it. You
Mm.
know, it's like, it's just bizarre that that would even ever be considered as a replacement for something that directly, specifically targets people with an express mission in a particular field of music that is so fragile and pays them with ensembles that can develop their career. Like the Vale of Glamorgan Festival, talking about like study and things like that. That was really where my career took off, was after my PhD and all that kind of stuff, working with John Metcalf and the Vale of Glamorgan Festival. My entire career kind of grew from just like small roles through that. And I think, you know, when you're seeing this kind of landscape change, when you're seeing these like these implemented huge organizations make these gigantic events, it just beggars belief that that is considered the alternative to it, you know. But just to cycle back very quickly, I gotta say Cardiff was probably my most positive university educational experience. Again, banging on about support. There were tutors there who spent more time than they should have helping me do things that I should have known years before I found them out. And because they did that, I was able to make a career. Particularly thinking of people like Rob Fawkins, who had no reason to help me at all, but did. Charles Wilson as well, who was helped me write all my applications and CVs and things like that. And I was a really not great student in a lot of ways because I didn't listen very well, but he was incredibly patient and kept doing stuff. And like, it was the reason I got like access to these things further down the line. So without like proper adults saying, do this, it wouldn't have been plausible in any sense of the word. But it blows
Well,
my mind.
I think I think that's my experience at university, but at teaching at Cardiff University is the place is full of academics like that. It's full of people who are passionate about going above and beyond for the students. And it seems that the management at Cardiff University, their main priority is getting in the way of that, is standing in between the passion for the tutors to go above and beyond for the students and the students. That seems to be like the crux of every decision that's made, is to get in the way. It just seems bizarre to me.
It's
Why not spend all that money on getting out of the way? I don't know.
I think I think it raises interesting questions about like funding in Wales in general, right? So how can such substantial sums of money be mismanaged in such a colossal way? And how is the solution to repair that, to get rid of profitable departments within a university, which my understanding is that the music department always was. So why would you do that? You know, there's if I was all of the Welsh government in one person, I would
I'd
I
vote
would
for you, Dave. I'd vote for you.
yeah, vote Dave. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be like you gotta think of some policies quick. Yeah. But I would sort of say like this mission around Welsh language and heritage is essential to everything, you know, and Alan Hodnott is the musical core of what that means in Wales. It is unbelievable that someone wouldn't step in and say, like, what are you doing? You know, what is going on here? This cannot go. Do you understand the historical significance of this? It's not a business thing. This is a cornerstone of Welsh heritage. Um, But the other questions it would raise to me then is like, why are other organizations funded in such questionable ways? For example, Arts Council Wales had, I think it was £450,000 worth of headship roles advertised. I don't think there's a single role for a funded composer to the value of the UK average musician's salary of £21,000. So I think they administrate a budget of £30 million. So like, where is, like, I probably through projects and like institutional funding, I can understand that to some extent, but like, what is the real impact on artists in Wales with that? Because we did used to have that funding, right? There did used to be those fellowships for composers, I think many years ago, that were like £25,000 or £20,000, something that seems like unimaginable now. So considering how that money is allocated and distributed, it does to me seem to raise questions of like mismanagement in multiple places that directly impacts artists negatively. So when people are going around and saying like you can't make a career in the arts in Wales anymore, right, and they're sort of being met with rolled eyes, maybe the response, instead of saying like, oh, that's just ridiculous, should be to look at what the institutions are doing and how the money is coming out of that to actual artists and how that is impacting them, because I don't feel like it's really getting where it needs to go. But with the caveat that I'm sure they have a really difficult time, and I know they're filled with really good people. But yeah, does still need.
Really good people on really good wages.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, all these poor people at the Arts Council who get criticised and have such a hard time are earning shitloads of cash.
Yeah, they're on salaried wages. They're paid the minimum salary for UK musicians. I think
the thing that disturbs me the most is that what I come across now and have done for quite a while is not the attitude that it's hard to make a living as an artist in Wales, but the attitude of like, why would you think you could? Why would you think you could that you have any right, or that you could make a living as an artist or a writer or an actor or, doing anything creative? Why would you possibly think that would be a career for you?
I think that's really, really interesting. And I do think that needs like proper answering, because I think it's also a new phenomenon. And I also don't think it's impossible. I've heard a lot of people like say outright to me, oh, I know this person, you just can't make a living in it. Like, you can make a living in it. You really, really, really can. The problem is that the administrative layers and organizational problems that prevent people accessing their money in a meaningful way. And that is I think that is what's happening. My own experiences of working with a lot of organizations in Wales, and it's not all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but like the number of times I've flagged to professional bodies that I have been not paid for something for eons, or that the payment has been changed, or someone has said something incorrect about something we agreed on previously. It is absurd. And I do think that with this sort of increasing power of these administrative layers, there is another increasing amount of exploitation of the people who are making the art in the first place. And with this idea that you can't make a living out of it comes this idea that you should be grateful for every penny you get.
Yeah.
Composers and musicians need to spin it the other way. They need to be like, the industry exists because we are doing this. And we need to be paid properly in order for it to continue to exist, right? So there was a conversation about the Ivors Academy recently where they charged £100 per entry for the Ivors Awards and £420 a ticket for their awards dinner, right? It used to be free. This was the British Composers Award previously, right? They a lot of people I spoke to acted as judges weren't paid previously. I can't say whether everyone's always paid for that kind of thing, but they're sort of taking a hard stance that they're just not going to change this, right? They've included bursaries now. So if you're from a working class background, if you divulge a load of really cringingly personal information, you can get the chance to have the fee waived. I think they might have changed it a little bit. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but still, it's more work for people from working class backgrounds than from money backgrounds.
To prove that they're poor.
Yeah, right. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
The number of times I've had to like fill out forms and give out so much personal information about
Yeah.
stuff. I I get why you're doing it, but this is rough. Like, this is
Yeah.
not okay, you know.
Yeah.
But it's across the UK. I feel like that there are rumblings from composers that new types of unions, new types of professional organizations are gonna emerge, and they need to emerge because everyone's just afraid. The
Mm.
composers are afraid of the organizations that should be representing them. Another administrative problem that I flagged to organizations in Wales is that people have different positions on multiple boards and organizations. So if you piss off one person, you've done it in lots of different places.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be the case. You know, you
Well,
shouldn't
that's
be.
because there's this idea in Wales that there's only like 12 people who who are good enough to sit on executive boards.
That's
And
exactly
they
what's for a charger.
and they all just circulate, you know. They all just. I remember there was a big kerfuffle. I'm not going to say any names or remember any names, but it's easy to Google. There was a big kerfuffle about the whiteness of the Arts Council,
Yeah.
so they put an advert out for some executive position, and essentially what happened was they had like this guy who of color came and took an executive position, but he was at the museum in an executive position, and he just swapped jobs with somebody at the Arts Council, with a white person at the Arts Council. They just swapped jobs.
Just switch on quick. Like, oh, it's just giving me a headache to think about it. You know, the other thing I find.
But it is. I remember when we were at Wales Arts Review, we had a board, obviously, and one of our board members said, "Oh, another magazine has asked me to join their board." And I just thought, it'd be okay to do both. And I said, "But no, this time next year, we're both going to be going for the same pot of funding money. You can't be on both boards." And frankly, I thought, well, if you didn't think that through, I don't really want you on our board. You're not quite up to it, to be honest. So I just said, you can go to the other board. That's fine.
Just do the other one, mate. I think it's crazy though. The board stuff really gets to me as well, because I think that the burden of diversity and like the earnestness and belief in things often falls on like trustees, I find, where they'll sort of like want to make the change and want to be involved, and they'll be like really motivated and invigorated, and then like they'll go and speak to the board, and they'll be like, they'll look like sort of 1800s American judges or something, and they'll all be there like, no,
It's like the Crucible. Sign your name.
It is though. And you think like, you sat there thinking, God, this, like, we're just gonna have to wait for this person to leave before we make any change.
Yeah,
Leave, like,
leave as in die,
like, yeah,
because they never leave.
but like it's dead serious. It's like like it is like that, right? And you think there is no change that can come through this. That's my conclusion from all of it. This is why I think like new organizations and new small festivals, and this is what gives me optimism, is that like the diverse groups of composers that I work with who are really motivated and engaged are very energized and like have an air of activism about them. And that does make me feel like something's coming, there's a storm coming. And I think that when people finally get that little bit of grip there, I think there's going to be really, really, really substantial changes, because there has to be, because there is no route. That's not to say I shouldn't be too doom and gloom. It's not to say there's not loads of great organisations in Wales. There are people like Symphonia Cymru are fantastic. Uproar Ensemble were fantastic to work with as well. And I had a really great time working with National Youth Guitar. So there are loads of people who are really, really amazing, who do all the things I'm complaining about, like in a really, really good way. They're not doing the bad things at all. They're doing all the good stuff in the right way that's focused on art, artistry, and impact. So like, it's not all doom and gloom. And, I feel like I need to be like,
no, I think, I think you're right. And also, I think we're going to have to end on that note. And we're going to have to do a part 2 where we actually get to talk about the music.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. It's so good.
So Dave, let's book you back in at a future date, and we'll talk about music, because I feel like we started off talking about class, and then did that for an hour and a half.
And I've done another thing. Yeah.
But Dave, it's been brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm serious. We'll have you back on, and we will.
Thank you.
I will ring fence the topic of music and composition,
Yeah,
rather than the
with
structures of music and of the industry. But yeah, thanks very much.
No worries, guys. Thank you for having me on. Thank you very, very much.
With an audience of one, you are unabandoned by crusting in the rain. You are a crowded train.